You just built your first woodworking bench and you want to put a vise on it and get to work right away. For years, I've been telling people don't buy a commercial vise, they suck. Just buy the screw and build your own vise. Build a leg vise. They're big and super flexible. They'll do everything you need and the price is right. Well, I said that for years, but honestly, things have changed. Right now, you could go on Amazon and buy this. This Yoast face vise is actually surprisingly decent, and it only costs $65. So the economics have really changed. Just buying the screw, this exact screw, is $45. So for 20 bucks more, you get the entire vise, and it's decent. It's made in China, it's made to a price point, so it doesn't have any slick features, no quick release, no pop-up dogs, but it's a vise, it totally works, and it's reasonably sturdy. So I think if you're just starting out and you want to get going, this is a great option. The only problem is these are a little bit harder to install than you might think. You really have to plan ahead, and there's a couple places where the installation can really go wrong. Luckily, I've done a few of these. I know all the pitfalls. So today, we're going to do the complete installation of this vise onto this bench, and I'm going to show you all the tricks so yours comes out right the first time. Oh, and you know what would go awesome right here? I've just taken a few minutes and transferred all the measurements from my front jaw onto my paper template. It's not perfect, it's just close enough for me to get an idea of what's going on. Making this paper template lets me position the vise on the bench and make sure I'm not going to hit anything during the installation. It lets me figure out the size of my wooden jaw, so this piece of paper is the exact finished size of my wooden jaw. I get to figure out the overhang, so I've left more wood overhanging on this side because I will put vertical pieces of wood in the vise over here, but not over here, so there's not really any overhang on this side. It's also helped me to figure out my depth. I've gone with 4 inches from the top of the bench to the screw. That's a pretty good depth. If we go a lot deeper than that and we crank the vise down hard on a piece of work, the vise jaw might split because there's nothing supporting it up here. So 4 inches is a good balance between capacity and strength. Now that I have all this stuff worked out, I'm just going to transfer the location of my bars and my screw to the top of the bench using a combination square, and then trace the outside of the template with a couple of pencil lines. That way, I have a rough idea of where everything's supposed to end up when I'm done. This vise comes with a little cotter pin at the end of this support bar. That's really smart because it keeps the vise from coming apart if you open it too far. Unfortunately, you have to disassemble the vise in order to install it, so installing this pin beforehand was pretty stupid. Once I unbend these tabs, I'm not going to be able to reuse it. So I'm going to take the whole vise apart and throw this pin away, and when I'm done, I'll put a little screw and a nut in here. That'll do the same thing. Once you have all your locations figured out, you can install the vise body underneath your bench top. One of the things I like about these English-style benches is the top is just screwed down. So I took out all those screws and just flipped this board over, and I can work on the underside really easily. Now I'm ready to get that vise body installed. And you might have noticed that I've got a new workbench. This is my new minimum timber bench. I built it because people have been asking me for a less expensive bench that uses less wood. So I came up with this design. It uses 1 2x10, 7 2x4s, and a couple little scraps you probably already have in your shop. And that's it. It's the cheapest, full-size, effective bench that I can possibly come up with. I'm really proud of it. I've been developing it for almost a year, and it's just about ready for prime time. We are doing the plans right now and recording a full course that you'll be able to take to guide you through every aspect of building this bench. All that stuff is going to be ready just in time for the holidays, so make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit that bell notification so you don't miss out on this bench when it's ready to be released. When I was making my paper template, I put 3 little tick marks on the top of the bench to show the locations of the 2 guide bars and the screw. And I've taken my combination square and copied those marks around this rim of the board so that now they're on the underside. And those 3 tick marks are going to let me just line up this vise body, just visually get it mostly in the right location, and that's perfect. And then it's also very important that the vise body is exactly parallel to this front edge. That's going to keep you from having a twisted vise, which would be really awful. So I've got my combination square set up, and I'm going to reference it off that front edge and just make sure that both ends of the vise body are the exact same distance from the front edge of the workbench. And they are. I also need the depth I talked about between the bars and the top of the vise jaw. This top is only 1.5 inches, so I've added some spacers. I took a 2x4, cross-cut off 2 pieces. I made them oversized so I'd have lots of room to position this body, and then I just screwed them to the underside of my bench top. And now that I know everything is lined up and square and where it needs to be, I'm going to trace these holes in pencil, and then I will drill pilot holes into my spacers and install the vise body using 2-inch lag screws and washers. I'm running these in using a socket wrench, but you could just use a crescent wrench if that's what you've got. With the vise body installed, now I just have to transfer these holes onto the front apron of my bench so I have the correct hole placement for the guide bars and the screw. And to do that, I actually made a simple little tool. This is just a dowel that almost fits in these holes. It's a little tiny bit loose, but I added a bit of blue tape, so it's a pretty snug fit. And then you can see at the end there, I put a tack right in the middle, nipped it off, and used a file to make a point. If I were a machinist, I would call this a transfer punch. I guess I should still call it a transfer punch. The point is, it fits pretty accurately in these holes, and I'm going to flip it back over and screw it back down. I'm going to get under the bench with a hammer, put this in here and give it a tap, move it to the other one and give it a tap, and that's going to transfer these holes perfectly onto the front apron of the bench so I know exactly where to drill. This is especially important because you can see I've got the vise body back a little bit from the front of the bench. The apron's going to go right here. The reason for that is these Yoast vises come with these 2 additional supports, which you can screw to the apron of your workbench, and your guide bars will pass through them and have an additional place to be supported. This seems silly when you first look at it, but it actually means the guide bars of your vise, instead of just being supported 2 places, maybe 4 inches apart, they're going to have a 3rd point of support, and the total distance here is more like 8 inches. These things are going to really cut down on racking and twisting when you're using the vise, and I know that because I've installed one of these before. So even though it seems like extra, we're going to take a little extra time to make sure these are properly aligned. My little transfer punch tool is going to make that super easy. Because of the design of this bench, it's very difficult to drill these holes from the inside, so I've used my combination square to transfer those hole locations up over the top and onto the front face. And now I'm going to drill those holes out. I'm using a 7/8 inch spade bit, so it's just a little bit bigger than those guide bars, and it's going to give me a little bit of wiggle room once I do the installation. Now the last thing I need to do is mark the hole for the screw, and that's not super easy, but since I already have these 2 holes, I can just slide the front of the vise in like that, and that gives me a pretty good approximate location. No need to be super precise here because I'm going to drill it with an oversized bit. This is a 1 1/4 inch spade bit, and that should give me a hole with a little bit of clearance. I'm just going to aim sort of for the center of what I just marked. I can always widen this hole up later if it's not perfect. And there we go. Now I've got my holes in the front, and I'm ready to test install the vise. So I just tried to install the vise, and these 2 holes lined up perfectly, but this hole is a little bit low because I was a little imprecise in placing it. If you wanted to, you could knock out the roll pin that's holding that together, disassemble the whole front of the vise, and use that as a template to mark those holes. That would definitely be the best way to do it. I was trying not to get that deep to make it easier for beginners, but the problem is I've ended up with this hole a tiny bit low. These things happen and you just have to adjust. I'm going to use my turning saw and a round rasp just to bring this hole up about 1/4 inch, and then everything's going to fit fine. Once the vise is on there, no one will see that you adjusted the hole. Or you might have to move that hole a lot and end up with a ragged, ugly mess that you can't bear to look at, which is exactly what happened to me. So I cut a square of matching wood, traced around it, chiseled out a recess, tapped that thing into place with some glue, planed it flush, and now I'm going to do what I should have done in the first place. This is a 7/32 punch, and I'm going to use it to knock out this roll pin. There we go. There's the pin. It's reusable and it's tapered, so it's easy to see which way it goes in. If you don't have a punch like this, they're very inexpensive, or you could also just grind the tip off of a big nail. That would work fine just for one of these. Without the screw, the vise jaw slides right in. My screw hole is right here, and now when I trace it, I'm going to have the location perfectly. Now that the vise jaw is properly installed in the apron, I can put in these collets. They actually add a lot of support to these guide bars, and they're going to make the vise work a lot better. I can slip them over the bars like this, and I've got the vise jaw supported on some scrap wood over here so it's level. And now I'll mark these with an awl right in the middle of each hole, drill them out, and install them with common wood screws. I've got a nice piece of yellow pine that I've planed smooth and flat, and I've got a scrap of 2x4 that's going to stand in for the top. It's going to give me that thickness so I can place this thing correctly. I've got the original marks I made off the template in the beginning of this project, and I'm going to use those to align this piece of wood. I'm going to make sure that it sticks up above the top of the bench just a tiny bit, and then when it's level and lined up, I'll clamp it in place, use my transfer punch to get my hole locations, drill out this piece of wood, and then install it on the movable jaw with wood screws. The vise is all done, but the final installation was way trickier than I was expecting. I thought I was going to be able to install the vise by just leaving everything loose, all the mounting bolts and screws, and then just wiggling the vise back and forth to get it fitted into the main body. And that didn't work at all. No matter how I shifted it around, I couldn't get it in there. What I finally figured out was I needed to take off the guide bars and fit those individually. Once they were in place, it was super easy to run in the main screw and then put on the nuts that hold the guide bars in place. Then I could move on to adding the handle. But before I could do that, the handle holder on these vises comes with a very sharp edge from the foundry, and you need to do something about that. So here I am removing that edge and rounding it over with a round file and just some plain sandpaper. Then I'm ready to install the handle, which is just a piece of oak dowel from the big box store, and to keep it from falling through, I'm cross-pegging it with a couple of smaller dowels, and those are tight press fit in their mounting holes. They're tight enough they're going to stay the way they are, but I'll add a little bit of super glue just in case. And any vise like this is going to run much sweeter with some lubrication. So I'm going to add some plain furniture paste wax to the guide bars and a couple drops of 3-in-1 oil to the main screw. Now, as I'm moving the vise right here, you might notice a lot of wobble, but that's because those guide bars haven't been tightened yet. Once I tighten down those nuts with a crescent wrench, you can see the vise moves much sweeter. And my last task is just to plane that vise jaw flush with the top of the bench. I left it a little bit proud on purpose. This only takes a couple of minutes and I'm completely finished. This video was supposed to be easy. All I'm doing is installing a vise, and I've done this before, this exact vise, but never on an English-style bench with an apron. And I admit, that made it much more difficult. This was legitimately hard, and I didn't think it was going to be. The process of putting this on has made me rethink how much I want to recommend this vise to people. I used to like it a lot, but it's difficult enough to install that I think a lot of people should just think about building a leg vise. A leg vise will genuinely do everything that this one will do. It costs less because you only have to buy the screw. They're very easy to install, they're easy to make, and they're extremely versatile and sturdy. If you like this vise and you want to get one, there is nothing wrong with it. It's a good design, very fair price. I will link to this down in the description. But the leg vise is easier and cheaper and every bit as capable. If you'd like to build a leg vise, I've got a set of plans and a video that will guide you through that. And just like I was mentioning before, this minimum timber bench we're currently doing the video, the course, and the plans for this. All that stuff is going to be ready in time for the holidays. But if you just can't wait, you can build my original English joiner's bench. We've got a build video series on that you can watch for free right here on YouTube. I've also got a massive 40-page plan bundle that's available at a very nice price, and you can find the links to all that stuff down in the description. If you need a bench that moves, check out my quick stack bench. It breaks down into 6 manageable pieces, and you can move it and set it up in about 3 minutes. I've got plans and a build video and a complete online course that can walk you through every part of building that bench. A lot of people have, and they've had a lot of success with it so far. And all of this stuff, all of my plans and everything, these are all available to my patrons for free. And my patrons also get a lot of extras, like I did a 5-video series on the planning and prototyping and building of this bench, and that whole series was only available to my patrons. If you'd like to be one of those people and help make these videos possible, go on over to patreon.com/RexKrueger. Check out all the rewards we have. Anyway, I'll be back next week with more woodworking goodness. See you then.